Set an alarm for 15 minutes from now. Hey, everybody.
You set an alarm for 15 minutes from... Okay. I set an alarm for 8:26 p.m.
There you go. Now you know what time it is. So, welcome to another day of 15 minutes. Hope you are on your elliptical or bike or maybe just taking a random walk and watching this random YouTube video. So yesterday, when last we left, I was talking about the John Wilkes Booth thing and the Lincoln assassination. And I'm not going to go on much with it past this video, at least for a while. Jump to other topics. But to kind of conclude what I was telling you yesterday, I was talking about how in the late 2000s, the descendants of John Wilkes Booth, who have become increasingly uncertain that the body from the barn that is buried in John Wilkes Booth plot is actually John Wilkes Booth. They have tried to, without success, get a DNA test done. They first attempted to have the body exhumed so they could do some DNA testing and compare it to the DNA of Edwin Booth, who is John Wilkes Booth's brother. But they were unsuccessful. The cemetery, as I may have mentioned yesterday, beg your pardon, said that because of the contract they had with Mary Booth, which was John Wilkes Booth's mother, that they would not allow, because it would be a violation of their contract with her. So that was pitched out the window. It's not like she was going to sue them. But anyway, so they denied them. Then it came known that 3 vertebrae were removed from the body in the barn during the autopsy and kept. So the family submitted a request, and this was in late 2011, to have part of the vertebrae compared to the DNA of Edwin Booth to see if they matched. Because ideally, if they matched, then you know for sure that is John Wilkes Booth, a guy who assassinated Lincoln, and all the rumors and conspiracy theories can finally be laid to rest. And this whole question of E. David George actually being the real John Wilkes Booth and having lived until his mid-60s, I think it was, in 1903, would be debunked as being true. Well, that was the last I heard of it during interviews and documentaries I saw. And then I did a little research online and got a hold of a Wikipedia page. And they talked about how what happened was in spring of 2012, 2 weeks before they were going to do a DNA test, that the Army Medical Facility that maintains the 3 vertebrae from this autopsy refused them access to it. They said that they felt it would be damaging, or that it would basically destroy the specimens for future history. Well, I can't think of a more plausible piece of history to confirm than whether or not that is actually John Wilkes Booth. But they denied him, saying that it would be destructive to the material. Well, one of the facilities, I can't remember what state it was in, but the university that was actually going to conduct the DNA test said it would absolutely not be destructive to the material. Not only that, we only need 2 grams worth of it in order to test to see if it's actually comparable to the DNA of Edwin Booth. So basically, it's a lot of runaround and BS by the government, generally speaking, but more specifically, the Army Medical Facility that maintains the material for this body in the barn, these 3 vertebrae. So it just goes to show that there's always secrets that are being hidden from the American people. I happened to see a documentary this morning done by a student for a class where she actually, I don't know if it was done by a student for a class, I think it was like a BBC type thing. And it's really fascinating to see the BBC produce a documentary. It was called, basically revolving around the concept of Abraham Lincoln, saint or sinner. And the whole goal of it was, and it was for some reason narrated by a British guy, and one of the major speakers in it was a British person. And what the hell they really are related to American history, I don't know. Not picking on the British, but it would be like any American going and doing a documentary on the Queen of England. Like, what the hell do we know about the Queen of England? We're not resided in that community. We haven't got any real concept of how that culture has evolved. And they may be white, they may be black, they may be Hispanic or whatever. But we have no real relatability to how their culture is. Their government is different. The way they live their lives is different. So it's a little odd to me, but moving on past that. Basically, we're talking about how ultimately, really, Abraham Lincoln was a politician, and that he really was a white supremacist, and that the reason he wanted to end slavery was not because he wanted to create equality for black persons, but because he wanted to prevent free soil. The free soil situation, let's see how we put this. Back in the mid-1850s is really when the GOP, the Republican Party, emerged. Lincoln was probably their most logical candidate, or their first prominent candidate. And basically, they were essentially trying to protect entrepreneurs in order to give them a chance to have their own business. And the slavery in the South was basically, they paid one flat fee and they had a slave. And aside from, maintenance for food and everything, they had free labor. And the people in the North, who were basically the entrepreneurs and didn't have that kind of money or availability of free labor, they didn't have that. They didn't have those kind of resources, and so essentially anyone who had slaves could put the entrepreneurs out of business. So basically, Lincoln and the Republican Party, according to this documentary, was basically trying to limit, sort of confine slavery to the southern states, hoping that eventually it would slowly die off as a result of being contained. So that was kind of the point of the documentary, in saying that Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves. In fact, what he wanted to do was to colonize them and deport them to Africa. Well, ultimately, we know the history said that he didn't do that. He actually freed the slaves, and some say in this documentary, they kind of go teeter-totter between saying that Lincoln actually was either playing the political game and always had the intention of freeing the slaves, or that he just did it because essentially he needed the black people who were in slavery to join the Union side in order to allow them to win. Well, I think anything is possible. I don't pretend to think that Abraham Lincoln was the perfect human being. Nor do I pretend to think anyone is the perfect human being. Okay, well, you know what I mean. No. Obviously, we all have flaws. In the end, they decided to make it where Lincoln actually had evolved into a person who believed in equality. My bottom line on Abraham Lincoln is the fact that he even did and took the actions he took was a sign that he was ahead of his time. Whether he started out as someone who didn't believe in equality or whatever, he took a step that irrevocably changed history and changed his lifespan as a result. So I think you have to respect him. The people who question and say he did it for this reason or that other than just equality, well, my question to you is, would you have rather the Confederacy won? Because then slavery would have expanded. We'd probably still have slavery to this day in this society. Because it was the change that Abraham Lincoln and the military men and women who fought for the North, that followed Lincoln's views on it, that changed history. And it was black people and it was white people working unified. And if you insult Abraham Lincoln and degrade him, then you degrade anybody who ever has quoted him who's high profile. Because essentially you're saying they're borrowing from a racist or a supremacist. That means you're insulting Martin Luther King and you're insulting Barack Obama. Because they're following the words of essentially a liar. So go ahead and insult Lincoln. Keep in mind who you're insulting, though, as relation to Lincoln. Because it doesn't say a lot about Martin Luther King or Barack Obama or anyone else who's ever said we need equality in this world. Just leave Abraham Lincoln alone. You didn't live in that time. It's like people talking about being slaves. The reality is that there are advantages and disadvantages to every ethnicity now. There are more scholarships for black people, more scholarships for people who are immigrants in this country than there are for the average Caucasian now. And yes, Caucasians have had advantages before, but why aren't we just going equally across the board? The more you perpetuate the wrong and negative behavior of anybody who's tried to create equality, the more you perpetuate racism or segregation of any class. Religiously, class, social class meaning, poor, rich, super wealthy. You perpetuate separation between us. I hate to quote a movie, of course, I can't remember the name of the movie or from which this line comes from, but can't we all just get along? I mean, really, let's just realize we're all part of the same world, okay? We all have hamburgers unless you're a vegan. We all have different styles of doing things. But in the end, we just want to live our lives as happily as possible. There's a line from a movie I really like it, and be what I leave you with, because I think my time is almost up. And it was from a movie called The Answer Man with Jeff Daniels, and Lauren Graham. Highly encourage you to check it out if you get a chance. And the line, this guy asks him a question. He says, there's so much I think I'm capable of. Why don't I do it? Why can't I do what I want to do? And Jeff Daniels, as the Answer Man, says, the trick is to realize that you're always doing what you want to do. Nobody's making you do anything. Once you get that, you see that you're free. And then life just becomes a series of choices. Nothing happens. You choose. And that's the way we need to look at the world. We choose the way we treat other people. We choose our destinies. You can believe that God has a destiny for you. If that's what you want to believe, you be happy, you feel free to believe it. For me, it's limiting in a way. I believe God created free will, or this higher power. I won't call it God, because I don't know what to call this greater force in the universe. I know we're all a part of it, in one way or another, and we can either use it to appreciate and help and support our fellow human beings, or you can use it to destroy it. History reoccurs because people don't learn from it. And that means pointing out the differences between us. We're all different in our own way. But we need to appreciate that and not keep pointing it out towards the negative side. Saying, hey, you got brown skin. That's awesome. It makes your eyes pop, or, it looks good with your smile. Or you did that beautiful white skin. It goes great with your blonde hair. Whatever it may be. Or, you look like a huge fag and drag. Whatever it is that guy called me. Just appreciate what makes you beautiful. Really, everybody is beautiful in some kind of capacity. So, my alarm's going off. I'm sure I went over the 15 minutes. See? Alright. Thanks for watching. Thanks for spending time with me. You really helped this walk. I really enjoy doing this. This feels like the great thing for me. So, take it, Air, and I will see you tomorrow. Take it easy.